Welcome, friends, to another Wolff Responds. I'd like to talk to you right now about the attempted assassination of Donald Trump. At least that's what it's called. And I know that many of you are wondering and thinking and trying to learn what you can about all of this. And the details are many, and they're inconsistent, and they're very confusing, and it's hard to understand what happened here, how it could happen. And there are a lot of folks focusing on how the Secret Service might not have done its job as well as it should have, or why it didn't respond to the people who saw the likely shooter there on the roof, and on and on and on. And more questions arise each day, and very few answers, and the few we get don't work real well. Granted, it's an extreme situation. Granted, there's lots of confusion. I want to take a step back with you and try to explain what's happening here, not get caught in what is emerging to be another grand theater that Americans will be talking about more or less reasonably for years, as we have the assassinations attempted and achieved of past presidents and leaders. Okay, here's how we're going to begin. When you have political violence, which has been growing in the United States, both in the rhetoric of Republicans and Democrats alike, but also in violent actions of one kind or another, luckily not killing one another yet, but we're getting closer and closer. The rhetoric is really beyond belief. And it's not just the extreme, strange rhetoric of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who literally blames the shooting on the Democrats, a party she says are pedophiles. I didn't make that up. And I could go on with the other examples that I'm sure many of you know. I want to take a step back. Why? Why the extreme language? Why the extreme actions? Why the settlement into our consciousness of a sense of being at risk? I live in New York City, and more of my friends and neighbors and associates are afraid to go out at night, walk the streets, take the subway, because of an ever-present sense of danger, of violence, of deep life and death risk. That's what's agitating people. If we had the shooter, that's what probably we would find out agitated him to go to this extent, if even all of that is true. What's happening and why? Well, we could argue that the political struggle between Republicans and Democrats is intense. Yes, it is. It usually is. And yes, the rhetoric hypes around election time, which we're getting to. Yes. But this is another level. This is more extreme. What is going on? And it's not an isolated act out of the blue. Mr. Trump distinguished himself in the first time he ran for president by giving speeches and telling his security to throw him out of the auditorium, get rid of him. What's going on here? Again, there's a level of rhetoric and action and bitterness and violence. And I want to give you my explanation. It's not that there isn't bad blood between Republicans and Democrats. There is. It's not just that there's bad blood within the Republican Party between the old conservatives and the new Trumpers, just as in the Democrat between the old centrists and Bernie Sanders's younger people with a desire for change. You all know about those. And they're at play. This is not an either or argument. But I want to add something that others have not pointed to, because I think herein lies why it is getting worse, why it is not being attended to, and why it's likely to blow up on us between now and the election in November and afterwards. Here's my explanation. The United States is going through a personal, political, economic, and social crisis. The crisis can be explained this way. We are a society that for most of the last century has been the dominant economic, political, cultural, and military power and shaper of the world. We aren't anymore. It's over. It has been for a while now, but it is gathering steam. And in our society, what I just said is a taboo. Biden doesn't say it. Trump doesn't say it. Even his invocation of MAGA wants to make America strong again, great again, without having to admit, well, if it has to be done again, what happened to it? How bad is it? Never, never, never anything that would get you to understand a crisis, and not one that can be handled by this or that economic policy. You don't get changes like this because a Republican or a Democrat was your last president. They don't have that much power, and they never did. We're talking about a historical transformation, something that happens once a century, if even that. That goes beyond Republican and Democrat. It goes beyond rhetoric. It goes beyond this or that detail. You can't explain this in terms of immigrants. That's preposterous. That's just a scapegoat. That has the same status here as the German crisis after World War I, which they lost, and the Great Inflation, which wiped them out, and then the Great Depression, which finished them off. And then they decided, let's kill a lot of Jews and gypsies and homosexuals. Yeah, go ahead, do it. It's not going to solve your problem. They went ahead, they did it. It didn't solve their problem. And getting rid of deporting immigrants won't either. That kind of an idea is a sign of something deeply wrong, because it's nuts, as these ideas usually are, because people are coming up with crazy solutions because they don't understand the problem. So now here is the problem. We are at a crisis point. The American empire is over. We are not able to grow our economy the way you have to if you're going to be the dominant power. Yours has to be the dominant economy. It was at the end of World War II. It was in the 60s and 70s. It was at the end of the 20th century, but it isn't anymore. For the last 30 years, the economy of China has grown 2 to 3 times faster than the United States. They caught up in 2020, and they're now ahead, and there's no end of that in sight. On July 16th, 2024, the International Monetary Fund released its latest numbers for economic growth in 2024. The United States will grow 2.6%. Europe, the Eurozone, will grow 0.9%. India will grow 7%, and China 5%. There it is, folks. It continues. They are coming up, and we aren't. And Americans somewhere, here comes my argument, get it. They grasp it. They fear it. They worry about it. They listen to their leaders pretend it isn't happening, and they're less and less convinced. But they're desperate for some answer. So some people become hateful and violent against poor immigrants. Others become hateful and violent against a political party, against a region of the country, against a particular candidate. They are all expressing a fear and an anxiety. And just like you do with little children who have fears and anxieties that are taking over, is you hug them and you sit down and you say, let's talk about it. We do have problems. We can work them out. We have problems, big ones, but we can work them out with the Chinese, the Indians, and the other parts of the world that want their chance to be rich and powerful too. That cannot be prevented short of nuclear war, which makes it all absurd. We're getting there. We're not there yet. The best lesson we can get from the aborted attempt to assassinate former President Trump, if that's indeed what happened, the best we can do about that is to face what has been shied away from, what is making us get crazy toward one another, which is not a good sign that we're getting any closer to a solution. This is Richard Wolff for Democracy at Work, hoping that you found this intervention interesting and worth thinking about. If you do, please share it with friends, family. That's why we make these videos. And of course, if you can contribute something to the costs, you can find out how to do that by going to our website, democracyatwork.info. Thank you.